Seems fair to me.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you with us. And on the second half, next up, Alvin and Wendy will be interviewing Bob Clark, the founder and the executive chairman of Clayco, who's trying to bring the next World's Fair to the United States. We'll talk about that. But first, let's meet the panelists who are around our brown table for this edition of the show, starting with Wendy Wiese from KTRS. Mr. Joe Holleman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com, sitting in for Bill. Ray Hartmann from RawStory.com, the Big 550 KTRS, and the Riverfront Times. And Alvin Reid, sports columnist and editor with the Riverfront Times. Or, excuse me, the St. Louis American.
Hey,
Nobody told me.
Another W2.
Well,
Yeah.
is he replacing me?
Well, I guess you're the last to know, Ray. All right.
Okay.
Alvin, sorry about that. We'll start with you. Tim Lomar, the prosecuting attorney for St. Charles County, has been arrested. It was June the 1st, last Friday, in Lake of the Ozarks on suspicion of being driving drunk. And so now he faces these DUI charges. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty. But if he is guilty, can he still lead an office in St. Charles County that prosecutes drunk drivers?
No, if he were to be found guilty, I think he should step down. I really do. I understand that he was voted in, and if the people want to continue to vote him in, that might be, you know, I wouldn't do it, but I really think he should step down, and here's why. One, prosecutors are supposed to be, you know, like kind of above the law. You look for them for justice. Now, whether it's, I know it's political and it's this and it's that, but I mean, it's the highest ranking law official either in your city or your state, or so, and then now how do you prosecute DWI cases? Because I'm an attorney and you know, the big name ones and whatnot. I said, like, I can't get it. I can't get a fair case there because, you know, he escaped his, and so now he's gonna say that I'm guilty. I think you get enough jurors who would say, like, no, I got a little problem here. So yeah, if he's found guilty, he should step down, and he should consider stepping down anyway. And strike two, he did have a little thing going on with ex-girlfriend, and he apologized, but it was still kind of a tawdry scene, I guess.
I think it certainly hinges on whether or not he's convicted or pleads guilty to it, but it certainly doesn't give a good look no matter what happens. But I think it's one of those, because you were elected by the people, let's hear what his case is. You know, I mean, he's saying, I'm not guilty, and I'll be exonerated in the end. So
yeah, but that wasn't the case with John Carlos Mohammed and Lewis Reed and Jeffrey Boyd. I mean, they immediately stepped down after they were charged.
They are lawmakers. Is there a difference between those who are making the laws and those who are actually...
If we're going to force every politician who's indicted for a crime to quit, then there'll be nobody left in any state legislature or city council.
And that was my...
But I think there is a difference, even though it sounds funny or humorous. I think there is a difference because a prosecutor is the one in charge with upholding the law, as opposed to the people who are making laws or making decisions.
Right.
And also, as far as I know, there wasn't a lot of recorded wiretap tape of Tim Lomar saying, let's all drink and drive, so which was a little different.
And you reminded me of something when you said that. Here's another problem with it. For him to, let's say, like, beat this rap, he's going to have to discredit a police officer.
Absolutely.
And if I'm a police officer, no matter where I am in the state, and I say, like, oh, okay, so the next time, you know, somebody's on us for doing our job wrong, remind yourself, prosecutor, that that was the first place you went. The attack is going to be that something was done wrong during his arrest. Because, you know, I'm sure they can figure out how much he had to drink. You know, so
good point.
I think we just see the process to its conclusion. But the first thought I had was all of the, you know, the outcry about Kim Gardner. you know, who in the world put her in office? The voters. Same thing with Tim Lamar.
Yeah, well, and I think that I wanted to not get too much into whataboutism, because I, as a bias, I think Tim Lamar's done a good job as a prosecutor. I think a lot of people do. And I don't really find fault with what you're saying. I sort of end up, and again, God knows if Kim Gardner did this for real, this would be, Eric Schmidt would probably already have marched down to, you know, from Jeff City with the state highway
Well, she
patrol.
was in a similar situation, you recall, when
she
on Christmas
didn't do drunk and driving.
No,
That's
Christmas
right.
Eve, she was driving around without her lights
downtown.
on.
Not
And
drunk. There's a big difference.
No, but let me just explain what she
Right.
did. She was driving without her lights on, and then she accused the police officer of pulling her over
lying.
for no reason. And then she said she was withheld for half an hour, when in fact she was withheld for like 7 minutes.
None of which rises to the level of it jeopardizing community with drunk driving.
Well, unless you believe that veracity is important in a job like that.
It doesn't jeopardize lives,
Yeah,
Charlie.
I'm with Ray on that. And I'm not excusing Kim Gardner.
I mean,
I don't
I'm not
excuse
defending
Kim
her.
Gardner.
I know.
But now this is
that had nothing to do with
But
drunk
what you were
driving.
going to say, I could speed read what you're going to say. You're going to say, if this happened to Kim Gardner, she'd be out right now. Well,
She would,
she
because
was in a
if it was
similar
drunk,
situation.
No, she wasn't in a similar. There's nothing similar about that situation
He
in drunk
is
driving.
maintaining his innocence, and that's exactly
that's fair.
what.
And he has a right to. Excuse me.
Okay, well,
No,
I mean, that's
no,
exactly what Kim Gardner is.
Right, but also, and the same with even Wesley Bell probably, if he had a DWI, I mean, you know, would be maybe treated a little differently. I will say this: I do think at the end of the day, it's up to the voters. But I
it's
think
not
that
exactly-
Alva,
It may be
your
state law.
point is good, that you're right on point. When you're found, if he is found guilty of something he's prosecuting, that's a little close to home.
Yeah. Wendy, I want to ask you about a case in, well, we talked a little bit about this last week. Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
And that's the sex tape in the St. Louis County Council chambers. As people probably know right now, Cal Harris was the chief of staff for St. Louis County Executive Sam Page, but he created a sex tape, he apparently has admitted, and he resigned. Now there's an ordinance that's been proposed that will be discussed on Tuesday in the County Council chambers, and it would prohibit any activity of a sexual nature in county buildings, in county vehicles, or on county property. So there's that. There's also, in the Twitterverse and elsewhere, people are kind of like moving the story away from Cal Harris and what he did, and saying that those who distributed the tape are, you know, really the ones who are problematic here, that they were passing the tape around like people sharing popcorn in a theater. Their words, not mine. Where'd you come down on this?
Well, first of all, it sort of had the old, you know, my dog ate my homework ring to it, where you're blaming Shamed Dogan, thank you, and Mark Harder for something that they had nothing to do with. You don't blame the messenger, and I think that Lisa Clancy is being a good soldier, and this is just sort of the, you know, that's what they're being told to do, you know, deflect. But how, I guess my question is, how far have we lowered the bar for leadership in government, where you actually have to have an ordinance to alert employees that sex acts should not be performed in offices or county vehicles paid for by the county taxpayers? If that is how low the bar is, then I think we all have a great deal of thinking to do.
I mean, one, I would like to look and see if any place else in America has already done that, because I bet you they have. All right, I don't think we're
St. Louis County Police Department already has that rule.
Okay, and then two, it's like Wendy said. All right, if you cannot realize that everything you do, your vehicle, and when you're at work and all that, it's all being paid for by the people, and the people probably don't want you doing this. So come on, pass an ordinance. Yeah, let's so nobody can cry.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what to say. First of all, it's good politics for Tim Fitch to bring up this ordinance. I don't think it's a pressing issue particularly, and I want to be careful how I choose my words. I think it's really strange politics to keep this story alive, if you're Sam Page, by bringing in Shamed Dogan and bringing in Mark Harder, who, as you say, weren't part of the story, and it keeps the story alive. The best thing politically with the election 3 or 4 weeks out.
Maintain radio silence.
Exactly. It is with a serious candidate, because I think Jane Duker has a very real chance to win. And I don't think it's very good politics to keep talking about this. And it's interesting to me how I'll bet this story has more traction, and whether it should or not will resonate more with voters and get their attention more than, say, Tony Weaver and the story at the
Let me ask you this:
his indictment.
The supporters of the county executive seem to be trying to point out that because this tape was distributed, and as far as I can see, the only way it could have been distributed off of Cal Harris's phone would have been by Cal Harris himself.
That's not what Travis Noble argues.
Well,
as attorney, but yeah,
okay. I don't know how else he come. I don't know how else he come out. But do we really think that the woman is a victim here if she, unless she was coerced, she willingly had sex in this office? And when you do something like that, aren't you pretty much vulnerable to what's going to happen?
If, in
How is
fact,
she a victim?
if she did not give consent to this being videoed, she's a victim, and of that. And by the way, I guess everybody else can act so worked up about this. I don't think it's so interesting. That act, the fact that it happened in a county office, I'm sorry, if you all want to get all work, make it a horrible thing. There's so much worse done, as we saw in the city and in the county.
Ray.
No, I mean, wow, yeah.
No, you're right.
This
You're right.
does not rise to the level of corrupt behavior.
But this is pretty basic.
It's not good. I mean,
this is pretty basic,
but it's
common sense stuff. And if we can't expect that basic level of common sense from our leaders.
Somehow I just don't think
let me talk about what is
one
important.
Of the burning issues of the day.
I think Ray is right. You know, at the end of the day, it's not the most important issue affecting St. Louis County. But here's the issue that
I bet it is to Mrs. Harris.
Well, that's a different issue for him.
Well, they may not be married.
I don't even know if she's married. Is it?
Last weekend was the most violent weekend of 2022 in the city of St. Louis. 7 people murdered, 21 shot. To date, almost 60 kids under the age of 17 have been shot in our area. It's just horrific. And there was also another horrific event, Joe, as you know, in Highland Park, Illinois, suburban Chicago, where a madman shot people during a parade. We know about that. All the news anchors, Lester Holt and CNN and MSNBC, they all went to Highland Park. Here, you could barely get coverage anywhere. I mean, when it came to the exact same number of lives lost, and just about the same number of shootings, maybe more, in the city of St. Louis. What's going on? Why is an issue that really matters, life and death, people getting mowed down, why is that not getting attention?
I'm going to be very careful with what I say here, just because don't want to look that it's all horrific. Highland Park was horrific. St. Louis over the 4th of July weekend was horrific. And I'm sure if we got numbers from other major cities around the United States, somewhat horrific as well. But the problem is basically network television and the coverage, because I relate it to the fact that more people die in car accidents than a plane crash. But a plane crash is better television. It's that simple. One person dying here, one person dying there, but you take it all in one place, it becomes that dramatic moment. I wish they would come to St. Louis and have an anchor spend 3 weeks where 8, 10, 12 people get shot, 6 of them killed, but one at a time, it doesn't have the impact. And that's why the television stations are there. To me, somebody getting shot and killed is somebody getting shot and killed. And when you start trying to do what's more dramatic about it.
It's like Klebold and Harris in Colorado. That is a place that you're smashing the idyllic scene of a high school in the mountains. You know, the Highland Park 4th of July parade. He was on his way to Wisconsin for part 2.
Madison.
I mean, exactly. So it's something that shatters something that is a long-held belief, and that we have traditions, and now they're just as vulnerable as as war zones.
Respectfully, I think this is an absurd comparison. So I guess my question to you is, which do you think we should have? I mean, first of all, you cannot watch the local news without seeing coverage of murders. That's all they lead with. And are you suggesting there should have been less coverage of the mass murder in a
No, I'm not, Ray.
Oh,
I'm taking this seriously.
No, I'm serious.
You know
so
what?
you
But you want to know something?
Do you want to have
Guess
a special
what?
every
The
day?
vice president didn't come to St. Louis,
Of course she didn't come to
Why
St.
not?
Louis.
You know, I'll tell you why.
What?
Because I think to a large extent, Democrats and friends in the media, when they see the mass shootings, they want to pin that, perhaps rightfully so, on Republicans who never want to ban any gun. Meanwhile, they're never critical of urban violence because that reflects poorly on the governance of a lot of cities which are governed by Democrats.
No, Ray, you may disagree with it, but it's not ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
No, it's not.
It's the way it is.
Okay, so let me get this
How many
straight.
columns have you written on violence? No. Let me ask you, since you turned on me, how many columns have you written on gun violence in the city?
I don't know.
0.
Well, that's, I haven't written on gun violence. I didn't write about Highland Park either.
It's
but
the most important
wait a minute.
issue.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so you're saying the vice president should come to every city where there's multiple mass murders. Well, wait, you just said she should come to St. Louis.
No, Ray, he's not saying any of that at all.
She did. He did.
No, he's
Yes,
not.
he
No,
did.
he's
He
not.
just said she should come to St. Louis.
What he's saying is, why was she in Highland Park and not here?
Because it was a mass murder at a 4th of July parade. The same reason that Republicans and Democrats.
Because there is an agenda.
So
there's not an agenda.
Ray, let me make a similar ridiculous statement.
Please
so you're saying the kids in St. Louis who died on 4th of July, it was not as horrific as the people who died.
That's what I'm saying, Joe.
Well, that's what you've done. You've been putting words in Charlie and my mouth for the last few minutes. Just to return
I don't care about those kids.
Of course.
No,
I let
Alvin Reid get a word in edgewise.
Of course that's not what you're
saying.
I don't know if the previous president would have gone to, Highland Park, because who knows what he would have done.
Well, yeah.
But every past Republican president would have gone to Highland Park. They would not have come to St. Louis, so I don't think he would say that, like, George Bush or anybody had an agenda because they went to Highland Park. That was terrible. It happened for 4th of July, and you could say it was for political reason or whatever. But that, it's not like the only reason she went there is because she was Democratic. I'm not buying that.
I think it's true.
All right. So I can't cast, whatever. And, 2, she'd have been busy because 4th of July, I think 230 people got killed over the weekend, 600 some odd injured by gunfire, and it was all over the country. It was rural, it was urban,
But in a broader context, his point is valid, that we have to stop separating loss of life at these,
Okay, all right. So you want to go down this path? Yeah. All right, you took me here. All right, Texas. Everybody sitting around wondering out loud, what was going on down there? Why didn't the police do this? And why didn't the police do that? You know why? Because it wasn't a classroom full of little white kids. And if it had been, it would have been D-Day in that school. All hands on deck, we going in. And there was just too much, who am I going to die for?
But wasn't the officer who was in charge of Uvalde, wasn't he Hispanic?
Doesn't make a difference, and this is one of the things, people say this all the time. Black people get fired, and they say, like, well, a black person fired him, so it can't be racism. He's got a boss, and he's got a career, and he's got a whole lot of other stuff. That is one of the biggest misnomers about race that is discussed in this country, is that, well, a black person fired him, or this person was black, and he was here or there. That means nothing. Clarence Thomas is black. What does that mean? Okay. I mean, don't go.
No, I'm just trying to understand, Alvin.
Okay, Alvin's right about that, but let me make a point there. We're in the news business. I've been in it for half a century, okay? Certain things are news. 20 people being murdered somewhere is not the equivalent of 20 separate murders. I'm sorry, from a news perspective, it is not.
I began this by saying it's why airplane crashes get more coverage than car crashes.
That was the last thing you said to me that made sense. But the fact is,
because it didn't make sense to you doesn't mean it didn't make sense, Ray.
But Ray, not to the victims' families.
No, I understand that, Charles, but the fact is a mass murder is a different scale of news event.
But from a cultural standpoint,
I'm not saying that their lives matter any more or less than the other lives. The point is it's not news if every weekend, tragically, and by the way, as far as the politics of this, I think the politics are about guns in either case. I don't think there's different politics.
In terms of politics, we're going to move on to you, Wendy, when it comes to campaign ads. We thought we saw them all. And now Eric Schmidt, who's running for U.S. Senate, he's the Attorney General for the state of Missouri, not to be outdone by Eric Greitens, who posed with a firearm, you know, in his third such ad recently.
Right.
He's got I don't know if it's a blowtorch. It looks like a tiki torch to me, to be honest with you, but he's carrying it like it's a firearm. And I heard Major Garrett on KMOX today say it's the Ramboization of American politics right now. I mean, do you think this is going to get people to pull the lever for him?
I just long for the days. Remember when Lamar Alexander was really considered like out there because he wore flannel shirts? Like, right? He looked like the brawny paper towel guy. You know, it was like, wow, he's really out there wearing a flannel, like, you know, wearing a checked flannel shirt. There's just entirely too much testosterone going on with these campaigns. One trying to prove that his flamethrower is larger than that guy's AK-47 or whatever. You know, that is not going to. There are a whole lot of voters that you're going to have to appeal to separate yourself, and that is not the way to appeal to a lot of voters.
Excuse me. You're right, but I'll add this. This isn't about American politics. It's about Trump politics. And the fact is, this is a battle, and I would submit it doesn't matter at the end of the day which one of these candidates wins, whether it's one of the Erics with their toys and too much testosterone, as you said, which I'm actually referred to in my column next week, or whether it's Vicky Hartzler, who's more anti-choice and more anti-everything than they are. At the end of the day, comes down for the American people as to who's going to vote for the next insurrection, who's going to vote, Okay. But
quickly,
I don't
because
think
time is limited, I want to ask you.
At all,
speaking of the Senate race, Ray,
at least we're limiting our ridiculous
what about
statements.
Trudy Bush Valentine? Earlier this week, she said that she would not take a salary if she's elected to the U.S. Senate. Some people say that's illegal, can't do that. I don't think that's that important. But what I do think is more important is that, kind of like Sam Page and who won't debate Jane Duker, she apparently will not debate her opponent, Mr. Coons.
She will not debate because she cannot debate. She's over her. She's out of her element. She's a fine person. Anybody born into great wealth and stuff that devotes their life to being a great mother and a nurse and all that, there's nothing wrong with Trudy Bush Valentine as a person, but she's in the wrong line of work, basically. And the problem is, I do think the future of American democracy might hinge on this control of the Senate. If you believe that way, the Democrats cannot be messing around with a candidate that can't work when they've got one in Lucas Coons who could win. And I wrote a column for next week just attacking the Democratic Party because the mainstream party is frightened about a guy who actually can convey the message in outstate Missouri. It doesn't matter what we think.
I think the mainstream party knows that he's going to win, so just save all that talk and whatnot until he's actually running against a Republican.
They're not supporting
and they're probably, look, I think, in my mind at least, Lucas Coons is going to run against Eric Greitens. So we can just save all our, back and forth until then, because, I just think that's how it's going to come down. She should debate. Everybody should debate.
I agree.
You should debate.
As a reporter, I think we should have more debates.
Well, Joe, I want to know, what did you think of David Brooks' column in the New York Times, where he took a look at the practice by the Democratic governors who put $30 million into the Illinois primary to defeat Richard Irvin. Irvin was the moderate Republican mayor of Aurora, Illinois. And they did that to defeat Irvin, the moderate, so they could face the Trumper, Darnell Bailey, in the finals. And he said it's the sleaziest thing that's possible today in politics.
Well, Mr. Brooks must not get out much or have paid attention to several hundred years of politics, but everybody has always tried to get the weakest opponent. Let us go back to Watergate, where it was all about not facing Muskie, but facing McGovern. I mean, it has always been the one side's aim which is my belief why Democrats so desperately want Eric Greitens to win the Republican primary, is because he looks at as the most beatable candidate. So was it sleazy? Yes. That's politics. Is politics sleazy? Yes, it is.
And that's why, for all of her, you know, very good intentions, it sort of circles back to the Trudy Bush Valentine. Wonderful person, heart's in the right place, but does she belong in this arena? That's a conversation that.
Well, all I want to say is, in 2016, Donald Trump wasn't taken seriously, and he ended up becoming the president of the United States.
That's true.
Who was he running against? That's all I'm gonna say.
But you're spinning the wheel, Charlie. I agree with you. If you say, okay, we'll get this guy in there, but that guy may end up winning.
But that's okay. I don't want to hear Democrats anymore saying, "Oh, where are the moderate Republicans like we used to have?" If you spend so much money defeating them in primaries, and they're not even in your primary.
Okay, I think it's. I hate to agree with Joe because it messes up, but I agree with Joe. And let me also say,
30 seconds, Ray.
Joe McCarthy in Wisconsin became on the scene because of that risk. I do not think Governor Pritzker in Illinois is taking any kind of risk. I actually think they may have wasted them. I don't think it mattered. He's going to win, and he should win. But when the Democrats played this game with Joe McCarthy, and because they thought he couldn't win, and guess what?
Okay, Ray, got to wrap it up. Thanks for that comment. A little historical note. Let's go to the letters and see what people had to say about last week's program, including comments by Tom Ryan on last week's Next Up when we had both sides of the abortion debate. That was a tremendous program. I have to give profound credit to both of the guests for their civilized behavior. All in all, though, I do have a problem with being governed by the 1825 laws. Were there not some practices then that became problematic in the 1860s? Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I think you made a mistake the other night when you turned Next Up into a debate with two guests of opposing views about abortion. Compare this with the previous program when three guests promoting Harvey Milk and other LGBT projects were treated with deference, interest, and respect. LGBT is also controversial, but no debate was allowed. That from Michael Dulick. You can write us, care of Donnybrook, 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook at 9pbs.org. And those tweets, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Now we've got the 9 line where you can share your comments about the program, 314-512-9094. Call it frequently. And we want to encourage you to find your podcast at Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. The clarity is great. You'll enjoy it, whatever you're doing. Thanks a lot to Joe Holleman for joining us on this edition. Bill will be back next week. In a moment, Bob Clark, the founder of Clayco, a $5 billion business with 3,000 employees, will be taking not phone calls, but questions from Alvin and Wendy. That's next. I hope you join them.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.